Now, last time we looked at a sort of a rough version of Landon's impromptu speech. I asked him to sort of manipulate some variables, and in this one, he's got the improved version. So let's go ahead and take a look at Landon speaking on the same exact thesis statement, which is a good teacher is almost always a good public speaker. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll walk through the evaluation rubric, the feedback form, in terms of what he's got going on there.
As an avid public speaker and a student myself, I've sat in a number of courses over my years, and I agree that a good teacher is almost always a good public speaker. Now, in looking at this, I believe this for two main reasons. First is that good teachers can read audiences. And second, good teachers can communicate clearly, all key components of public speaking as well. Now, I believe it's important for good teachers that can read audiences because your excellent professors out there can tell when students are not getting concepts and can make adaptations to the way the lectures work. I remember in one class I took, an astronomy course, I was having a very difficult time in that class, as well as a number of people sitting around me in that course. What I remember is that the teacher was very skilled in making those adaptations. He was a wonderful public speaker, and would be able to notice when the audience among him was having difficulties, when we were having a hard time grasping key concepts. You'd make those observations and adapt lectures to make sure that everyone was on par with the information, and while the class and the material did remain difficult, the teacher's efforts in those adaptations and the way that he spoke made it much easier for us to follow throughout the course. Now, on top of that, excellent professors can tell when students need more time to work on homework or when it's time to stand up and move around. This is important because the teacher needs to be able to read their audiences. When they see the students becoming restless or looking tired, that's when they can know it's time to take a break, being able to break from the mold of their formulaic speeches or lectures in some cases, and really once again begin to adapt to the audience themselves, what they need to do in order to allot more time for the success of the students. Now, for these two reasons, the ability to adapt and read their students when they need more time to work makes teachers very good at reading audiences when they are a good public speaker. Now, the next thing we can look at is that good teachers can communicate clearly, another tenet of public speaking. Now, excellent teachers are very easy to take notes from. Inversely, bad speakers at times can be more difficult. Remember, I was in an evolution class, once again a very difficult class for me, but the teacher was on par with the lecture, following a very good structure and organization that allowed me to flow my notes with the natural order in which she presented the information. Because of the organization of her speech, it was much easier for me to follow along and take notes, and I had greater success because of it. On top of that, teachers are able to elaborate ideas. A lot of these elements are theoretical in nature, and a good teacher and public speaker is really able to pull on examples to make these theoretical elements much more tangible and provide the flesh to the bones of an idea. It is through these two elements that a good teacher can communicate clearly. On top of that, these teachers can read their audiences. And it is really for these two main reasons, I believe, that a good teacher is almost always a good public speaker.
So that was much better, and I think the delivery changes a little bit. So initially we said his delivery was good. Certainly I would say his delivery is in that excellent category. But the thing that makes the biggest difference in that speech is not delivery. It is that the invention and the arrangement is just much better done, and it's much easier to follow along with. So once again, if I'm going through the flow and I'm thinking about the feedback form, here's what sort of stands out to me. So we're in that introduction, it's very clear, right? I get a good preview in that introduction. And it's not ham-fisted, it's not my first main point that I will speak on is now going to be, it's not like that, but he does provide those signpost words. So as I'm taking notes, I know what to write down. So he's signaling which way he's going. Those claims are better, and above the one that he did that was the rougher version, there are actually 2 points instead of just one. So then we jump into to the first main point. Good teachers can read audiences. And once again, he sort of unpacks that a little bit, gets me ready for the evidence that he's going to bring in. And then he's got two examples here. Good teachers as speakers can tell when their audiences aren't getting it, and he talks about this astronomy class, and good teachers can tell when students need more time or they need time to move. So that 1A, I think, is very strong. In telling that story, he's illustrating the claim. He sets out to prove that good teachers can read audiences. So we've got sort of three things operating in that claim and in that thesis statement. Good teachers, good speakers, the relationship between the two makes for a better education. So I mean, those are all three things that are going on, and he hits all of those, or he captures all of those in that discussion of that example. That astronomy class captures the core essence of that. Right, now when we get into later speeches, more planned out speeches, informative speeches, persuasive speeches, we're going to want actual evidence there instead of anecdotal evidence. But for now, just as a way of practicing these speeches and getting our thoughts together quickly, being able to work with those anecdotes are good because they provide context and texture to that claim. So that first main point, I think, does that well, especially that 1A. Now the 1B, I would say, where he's talking about good teachers can tell when students need more time, I would say that needs more detail. I'd say it's very strong. I think it's a good piece of evidence. If I was just looking at the 1B, it would probably be in the good category. But unlike the 1A had a tangible example, and that really helped bring together the argument, and it gave him more to talk about. That 1B doesn't have quite as much going on in it. It's sort of more broad discussion, vague discussion without sort of a concrete example. So let's go ahead and jump down to his point 2. Good teachers can, as good public speakers, can communicate clearly. So it's easy to take notes from them. And again, he points to a specific example in evolution class. Once again, I think that 2A is very good. He sets out a claim in his second point, and then he unpacks that claim, but he proves that claim and then illustrates it as well in his 2A. Since he's got that specific example, it demonstrates in real time what it means to communicate clearly and why that's good for students and why good teachers would therefore have that capacity. As with his 1B, his 2B needed, I think, maybe a little bit more detail. Good teachers as speakers can elaborate on ideas. And he certainly convinces me of that. I know what he's talking about there, but I would like more sort of tangible detail. And I think it would allow him to discuss that in greater depth. But overall, the invention is pretty strong. The arrangement is just very clear. We know what he's talking about. At no point am I lost in his speech. I know where he is at each and every point. And the delivery was certainly more engaging and had really good pacing. So in the bad one, we were saying that there wasn't a lot of chunking of the presentation. That didn't have sort of all the main points sort of flowed together. Here, they were discrete elements. You could feel when you were in the 1A versus the 1B. You could feel when you were in the 2A versus the 2B, and so on and so forth. So if I'm walking through this better speech in terms of the rubric, invention, main points, I've got on here good, although I could easily see either good or excellent, because they clearly related to that thesis. Support, I think good. Once again, his 1A and his 2A were dead on. His 1B and his 2B probably needed more detail. Arrangement, excellent. At no point was I lost. I knew exactly where he was each and every time. In terms of delivery, I'd go ahead and classify this as excellent. It's certainly very engaging, and the delivery is helping me follow along with his key ideas. So this is just a way of I want to make sure that the terms on this feedback form make sense. And I want to make sure that we as a class, as a public, have shared definitions about these terms. And that's because I think that's good for teaching public speaking, so everybody knows what we're talking about. And since this is in a class that uses peer review, I want to make sure that peer review is as good as it can be. And in order to get there, we got to have shared meaning around this terminology. Otherwise, as I've seen critiques of peer review in the past, it's merely the blind leading the blind. Let us, I don't know how far I can run with that metaphor, let us put on our glasses of feedback forms, let us put on our lenses of rubrics. I just want to make sure that we all know what this means so that you're going to be better at doing these speeches, so that you're going to be better at analyzing these speeches, and so that you're going to get better feedback from your peers on these speeches.